Hi, everyone. Welcome to an episode of Wharton Tech Talks. I'm your host, Manasi, today. We're joined by Mary Patton, who goes by MP Eisen, who's a VP of Partnerships at Glean, which is a leading AI platform geared towards generating unique, tailored insights for enterprise users. Glean's AI-powered work assistant offers personalized responses to queries and helps extract recommendations within business databases. Glean last raised $200 million for their Series D, which was in February of this year, and in that round was valued at $2.2 billion. Prior to Glean, MP was a VP of Channel Sales at Asana and also a member of the Business Ops and Strategy team at NerdWallet. MP is a fellow Wharton grad where she received her MBA in 2016 and also got her bachelor's degree from Georgetown. MP, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back on the podcast with you guys.
Awesome. Well, we'd love to get started by hearing a little bit about your early career and kind of journey through business school. So I know from our earlier conversations, you were really immersed in the sales and operations ecosystem within innovative companies in the East Africa region. Coming from that, would love to hear about how you came across technology as a potential career path and how did Wharton influence that decision-making process?
Yeah, good memory from our intro call recently. So when I came into business school, I was very much a non-traditional background student. I remember feeling that quite keenly because I had spent the last 2 years living in East Africa, which everyone assumed was Peace Corps. And I would always say, actually, no, private sector. I was working for a family conglomerate, a bunch of different businesses, and it was really scrappy and really fun. I think that definitely coming into business school, I had not the most common professional experience, but it was so critical to getting me to where I am today that I'm very grateful for it. But coming into business school, I knew that I was interested in technology. I had been working with companies in the region who were doing really cool things with telecoms and mobile money. This is when M-Pesa was really big. So in my mind, I thought to myself, I'm going to go to business school and then I'm either going to go back to East Africa, Kenya, and work there and build companies and implement technology in emerging markets, or I want to head to San Francisco to be just at the forefront of the innovation and be there where it's all happening. I don't think that's like a very common path, post-Wharton path is Kenya or San Francisco, Nairobi or San Francisco, I should say. But that's kind of where I was. And Wharton helped me to think that through and also land in the type of tech job that I wanted. I did the semester in San Francisco in my fall of my second year. And for me, that was almost like my test run of the city. I had actually spent my summer internship in Kenya, and that was a whole nother story and adventure. So I used SSF essentially as my test run of the city, and I really enjoyed it and decided to come back after graduation and got into tech from there.
That's great. Really incredible story. And now you're in SF as well. So that's awesome. I'm glad you continued your love of the Bay Area. Switching gears to Glean, you started in this leadership role last year. Of course, there's been a lot of talk about the Gen AI ecosystem, and I think we're all familiar with the growth and all the potential it promises. But for you specifically, how did you think about entering the Gen AI space, and how did you think about the best role, the strategy around the company you wanted to join?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I get asked this a lot right now because markets are turbulent. There's a lot of happening in the Gen AI space. And honestly, and this is advice I give to many folks, is that a lot of times it comes down to timing. And you want to always put yourselves in the most serendipitous situations to take advantage of that. But to be clear, there's definitely an element of timing here. So when I left Asana at the end of 2022, that was about after 5 years. And I wanted to take a break a few months to visit family, attend to my personal life and take a breather and explore career paths. I think I ended up speaking to probably about 40 companies during that period. And honestly, my first strategy was optimizing for the role. I was actually interviewing more for CRO, COO roles at smaller companies than Glean, I mean. I was actually a little surprised, not surprised, but it was an inbound rather from Arvind, our CEO at Glean, asking me about my interest in working there for partnerships. And the connection came through one of their investors, Kleiner Perkins. I was working with one of their in-house recruiters. And so that's where Arvind saw my profile. And we ended up having discussions over probably a 3-month period because I was, again, had my sights set on a slightly different next step. But once I dug into the product and the company and the business potential, the market opportunity, it was clear to me that taking not optimizing for the role, but rather optimizing for the company and the product and the leader is always the right choice, I would say. I'm glad that I kind of tested that, it scratched that itch rather of like interviewing for some different CRO, COO roles and kind of seeing if that is what I jived with. But ultimately, coming back into partnerships, but getting to work at Glean, it's actually, I'm so grateful for it because it's something I can now come into with a lot of experience and authority. And I have really strong opinions. And that's why on how to set things up and policies and processes. And so I wanted to make sure that Arvind was really on board with that and aligned with partnerships as a strategy. That's why it took us a few months to really get to know each other and spend time together to make sure that we could work together well and carry out this vision that he has for partnerships. So yeah, it was an interesting way to get into Glean. But again, it was a lot about timing because I happened to be looking for a job right after ChatGPT and everything was really just going gangbusters. So I'm grateful that it all worked out.
You mentioned how product strength was going to be a major factor in your decision making around where to go. Could you talk a little bit about how you thought about Glean's product suite at the time and kind of what things you were looking for when diligencing whether this was a product you had conviction in?
Yes, it's a good question because admittedly, when I first came upon Glean, I had heard about it before Arvind reached out. But when I went back to their website, it didn't really come across to me as the most complex or different product. I thought, okay, search, okay, like, yes, we need that, but can you do just Control F on your laptop? Like, I mean, I'm teasing. I know it wasn't quite that basic, but it took me time to really get to understand the product. And that is another reason why I spent so much time with Arvind to understand the opportunity, because I also wanted to spend time evaluating the technology, looking through their product roadmap, kind of assessing all the different features they'd rolled out over time. And this was in around May of 2023. So ChatGPT had just come out, and I knew that that was going to just revolutionize and change everything. Glean actually integrated GPT-4 into, well, I guess at the time it wasn't 4, but GPT into the product so that now you can not only search across all your data in your company, which was their initial value proposition, but also engage with it and summarize it, pull together different content from different places now that we have these LLMs. I knew that that was going to be a huge market opportunity and a type of technology that I just wanted to get really close to start to understand. And then Arvind had actually been at Google in the early 2000s when they were building Google search. So, I mean, you can't really get a better authoritative figure on search than that. And I had a lot of faith in him as that product leader. He's also a second-time founder. His other company, Rubrik, IPO'd a couple of weeks ago, actually. Let's hope he goes 2 for 2. And I think it was a combination of the product experience, the product opportunity, and really just actually experiencing the product itself. It is kind of magical in a way. So I was a yes on that checkbox.
You also touched on how this partnerships role was not necessarily what you had started your search with, but it really fit Glean's strategy and was a great fit for you. Within Glean, could you walk us through where partnerships fits within the larger go-to-market organization? And I think there are some companies that don't have a stated partnerships, or some like Glean that do and invest heavily in it. So it would also be helpful to understand, like, when does a company really decide devote headcount and devote resources to creating a partnerships org?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I'm impressed with your kind of industry knowledge that it is actually not very common. When I was assessing this role and Arvind had said, we're going to lean into partnerships, we're looking for someone to come in and drive the strategy and build out a team and really 10x the business. My response was, okay, how much conviction do you have in this function? Like in terms of headcount and in terms of reporting lines, because if partnerships is as important as you say it is for the company, then I should be reporting directly to you. And that is not always very common. Oftentimes partnerships can either live, if they are more product focused, then they'll live in product, or if they're more channel focused, it'll live under sales. But right now our structure is we have a head of sales and success, we have a head of marketing, and then a head of partnerships. That's how we all together lead the go-to-market at Glean. You're right. It's not as common to see a head of partnerships in quite this exact structure, but Glean as a product, it's nothing without its partners. We rely on different data sources, and the connectors are one of our technical differentiators. So just by virtue of the product itself, partnerships is critical. I knew that that was going to be a big opportunity and one that I was willing to take if we were going to actually put it into our go-to-market strategy and not have it as just an extra function on the side, but truly lean into partnerships across the whole spectrum, across all the different partner types to make sure that we're actually getting the most out of this function. So That was another reason why my conversations with Arvind took 3 months, because we had to talk through pieces like that and a few things that I was quite adamant about.
And on that note, Glean operates under this B2B enterprise structure. Enterprise is, of course, a really amazing market to sell into, but also challenging, just given some of these companies might have long sales cycles. There might be multiple stakeholders you're addressing. But at the same time, there's a lot of ROI you can demonstrate and a lot of upside. Would be curious to hear about how Glean thinks about its overarching go-to-market strategy. And especially after you joined, how was the thought process around which industries to focus on, whether to really focus on biggest enterprise versus maybe some of those like mid to large enterprises?
Yes. So every enterprise SaaS business's go-to-market is probably going to be slightly different based on a few major factors, but one in particular to call out for Glean. And this to me was really stark because I was coming from Asana, where the majority of our revenue, or rather, I guess about half, was coming from our self-serve channels, which is to say when people just go to asana.com and they click the try Asana and create a login and start, there you go. That's the product-led growth. That's a PLG sales motion. We don't have that at Glean today. I'm sure we will have that to a certain degree in the future, but that's not our current go-to-market strategy. That kind of product experience and the architecture of the product is such that it's not such an easy motion to lean into. That is why we're actually sales-led. We're mostly a true enterprise sell, tops down implementation. We end up going to the CIO, and that is our approach, especially with partners when we want to get introductions and kind of get deeper into these accounts. That is obviously how we structured this sales team and what we're going to try and drive. We've segmented into enterprise, mid-market, SMB. We have different cutoff lines, and those are always fluctuating when you're in a growing startup. We want to cater to all of those. A lot of our revenue is coming from these larger companies, of course, because they're deploying tens of thousands of licenses. So it is important to us to start to have that SMB segment like much more high velocity and almost getting closer to that self-serve motion in a way, while we can also focus on more of that strategic sell into the enterprise. As for industries, our industry agnostic and our product is industry agnostic. It can be applied in a lot of various ways. Of course, with any horizontal product like this, you're going to find in certain industries that are really strong. We'll go and focus on those with whether it's digital natives, financial services, telecom, CPG, and retail. So of course, there will be some that we're intentional about, especially when we do our go-to-market with partners. But generally speaking, we have customers from all sorts of lines of business. So it's a fun variety and it's a good diversity across our business to have.
For sure. And as a super quick follow-up, I'm sure search is something that is well understood, but this approach that Glean has is probably something new to a lot of these enterprises. So is it sometimes a little evangelical in regards to the pitch and getting in front of these clients? Or do you find that they're familiar with the value prop? They're pretty sure this is something they'd like to purchase, and it's really about showing them why Glean should be the vendor they select?
That's a very good question. I mean, it's a little bit of both is my non-answer to that. I would say we are so lucky right now to have the tailwinds of Gen AI because that people get. And when we say it's ChatGPT for business, then people get it. It's really, really easy. So in one sense, there's this amazing pull, or rather these tailwinds for us in the business. And a lot of companies are trying to figure out their Gen AI strategy, and they know that they need to start testing it and using it. So they're looking for something that is enterprise ready, that brings generative AI to their employees immediately. And that's Glean. So on the one hand, we have that. But then you also have definitely a level of, I like how you said evangelicism, because I think you don't really understand it, honestly, until you see the product. And that's honestly another reason why I hadn't appreciated the product at the first glance, just kind of looking through the website. Once you really, truly see it in action, it's like, whoa, this is so cool. I feel that level of evangelicism, I guess, when we're actually in the demo part of the pitch. It's like when people are like, whoa, okay, I get it. So this is a new way of working. It's actually able to go across all these different data sources. And I no longer really need to worry too much about where my content is or how it's structured. As long as it exists, then I can search it and I can use it and leverage it. And also we can democratize that information across the company. Those are some of the aspects that really get me excited and what I think it's going to make Glean such a differentiated product in the future.
Awesome. Really helpful. Moving to the partner ecosystem a bit. So for Glean, the partner categories include a number of really impactful areas, from value-added resellers to the cloud platforms, ISVs, and then the global SIs or system integrators. Could you talk a little bit about these categories and how Glean thought about these are the buckets we'd like to focus on?
Yes. Very well done with all the acronyms and things. It's a funny world. I know it takes a little bit of time for folks to kind of get ramped up on these acronyms, but yeah, to lay it out for you. So the way that we bucket our partnerships is first is our cloud partners. So that entails a really strong marketplace motion where we're selling through the Google, or we call it GCP marketplace, or the AWS marketplace. A lot of our partnership activity stems from those cloud partners. They've obviously built themselves into the ecosystem really well. They have preferred value added resellers or VARs that they work with. So that tends to flow into introducing us to those VARs. We start working and selling with them. So that's where bucket number 2 comes in, which is value added resellers and resellers. And these are your typical big companies like Insight and SHI, VARs like Trace3, that are out there talking to these customers of theirs every day about a whole bunch of different products, right? These companies are not selling one product. They're not an ISV, they're a channel partner. And so it's important for us to have those relationships with those sellers because their clients, their customers are going to them and saying, well, what do you suggest? You've been my IT guy for the past 5 years. I've bought every single product from you. Like, you tell me what I need to be using right now for Gen AI. So that's why we want to be in that conversation and we want to reach that partner type. The third bucket is our systems integrators and global systems integrators. And so that can include your classic GSIs like Accenture, Capgemini, EY, or your strategic management consulting firms like Bain and McKinsey, and smaller SIs too that are maybe like specific shops like an Atlassian partner that does some ITSM work or something like that. So that's fun because that bucket entails a lot of custom development, product innovation, thinking about how to implement these big strategic projects into enterprises. That's a really fun one. And then the fourth bucket is our tech partners, or ISVs as we call them. And again, as I mentioned, Glean is nothing without its data sources and its partners. And those are really critical to us. We have both connector partners that we connect with and ingest that, or not ingest, rather, we don't ingest, we just index the information from those data sources. So we have connector partners. We also have partners that we're doing more bespoke embeds or widgets for as well, which has been really exciting. So again, that was another reason I joined Glean, was because I realized the breadth of the partner opportunity. And it's rare that you have a company and a product really that has that incentive and it's structured that way, because our product drives compute, or rather you need to host it. That's where the cloud partners come in, right? That's why they're so interested. And so again, it kind of goes from there. The incentives are super aligned. And with the tailwinds right now from Gen AI, it's really this partnerships team and traction has ramped so much faster than I had even hoped. It's been incredible.
Yeah, great to hear. And this is a 2-part question, but first, when you're starting these conversations with the partners, how do you define the ROI they might receive and the reason they should partner with Glean? But then second, once the partnership has been signed and it's off the ground, how do you measure the success of the partnership and whether or not it's having a good impact on Glean's business?
Yeah. The benefit to the partner, it depends slightly on the partner type. So if you're a VAR or reseller, you're interested in the margin that we're going to give you. We're going to give you a percentage cut of that deal because essentially you brought us that lead. That is one very clear incentive. And also, I would say the services are really important, both for the VARs, but the SIs and GSIs. They're thinking, how can I take this product and go and implement it at my client and make sure it's custom and bespoke implementation and essentially make services revenue off this product, right? That's their business model. They are services companies, and we are not that. We are a product company. So that's why we lean on those partners to do those implementations. So describing to those partners, hey, here are some of the custom and bespoke things that you can do with our retrieval augmented generation platform. And you can go and build your own custom AI assistants. So that's kind of the allure, I guess, for those services oriented partners. For the cloud partners, I guess I would say it's the same roughly as a margin, because we work with the GCP reps or AWS reps to sell. And similarly, they get quota retirement off of it or get a transaction fee when it goes through the marketplace. So there's lots of different good incentives there. But again, I would say across all the partner types, really the best benefit right now is we are an enterprise ready product with Gen AI embedded in it that can start being delivered and used by your employees today. And everyone wants that right now. So that, like, honestly, in and of itself is almost benefit alone. Again, it's been fun to kind of see the traction and interest here because we don't really have to push the benefit too much. It's really a nice position to be in.
Yeah. And I can see how the incentives are aligned across all the parties, right? Because they're looking for ways to increase AI adoption. And it's a good mark for their business unit too, especially for the SIs. And of course, that matches Glean's goals as well. One aspect of partnerships is one part is marketing, getting the solution to market. The other is actually maybe getting some feedback on product and maybe even getting some influence on how product strategy and roadmap should evolve. To the extent that's the case, when do other teams at Glean typically get looped in? And could you talk a little bit about maybe the categories of product changes that might come up as a result of these partnerships?
Yes, I'll share here what I can. From a high level, I would say the way that partnerships works with product, I mean, with the product partnerships, it literally starts with the product. So it has to originate from that way of thinking, from a user-focused perspective, making sure that it's actually valuable to the customer. Now, my team will be involved in that conversation the whole way through to make sure that it also just makes sense from a go-to-market perspective. But first and foremost, it needs to be driven by what is actually feasible in our tech stack and will it actually take from an R&D effort to do this actual partnership. That's how we evaluate these partnerships. And again, I'm involved and my team's involved in these conversations along the way, but it's highly a product-driven conversation at that point. Rather, like once the roadmap has kicked off, the joint roadmap, I mean, we start working with that ISV partner immediately to say, okay, great. So we've got this product. Here's the timeline. How are we going to start putting together collateral on this product to share both with customers, but also with our AEs? How are we going to enable both of our AEs to cross-sell? So we know how to pitch it. Y'all sales reps know how to pitch it. We'll start planning different events that we want to do, some press releases with some joint quotes in there. That's really fun. I mean, one perfect example is with our Amazon or AWS partnership. We've been building our AWS offering. This is slightly different since it's hosting, but it's similar concept is we've been building the AWS offering for, a year, almost a year. I've been involved with these conversations with AWS from the beginning because it involved a lot of commercial negotiations that we were going through, some strategic collaboration agreements, lots of go-to-market planning. So again, I was involved throughout all of that process, but once it actually goes to market and it's live, that's when like you really turn on the engine and you say, okay, like we're going to start training all the AEs. Here's what you have to do in order to go and talk to that rep at that ISV in order to get into that account. Here's how we'll help you tier and segment your accounts. Here's the go-to-market roadmap with our partner. So it's really fun to kind of see how it all unfolds. And for AWS and specifically, it actually kind of culminated last night. We had our first product launch event at Glean's first product launch event here in San Francisco. And we had AWS and Anthropic on the stage with us as speakers. And that to me is so cool getting to see finally after all this work with AWS and working with their technical teams and their sales teams and alignment with their executives, finally getting to see that strategic alignment and it coming to fruition. That's the really fun part. And we have a similar dynamic with the tech and ISV partners too. So I'm excited. We've got some really, really cool ones in the works. So in a couple months, I would say, keep an eye out for some joint press releases. It'll be some cool stuff that we're coming up with.
Totally looking forward to it. And one of your big cloud partners that have been publicly announced is Google Cloud, which was announced in early 2023. How did that come about and what's the impact been so far?
The Google relationship is a very unique one. As I mentioned previously, Arvind worked there for a decade in the early 2000s, and it wasn't as big as it is now. He knew most folks there, and most of these people are now CEOs all around the Bay. So it's crazy to see kind of what the different folks from that time have gone on to do. But we obviously have very tight connections with Google. So when Arvind started the company, they were building everything on GCP. So our product ran first and foremost on Google Cloud. That was kind of the initial partnership from the get-go. And it's been a really, really, really productive one because we have that tops down alignment. We've got different product conversations going. We've really ironed out kind of our go-to-market and our marketplace motion. It's been really fun kind of getting that partnership really structured and scaling it out now. When we listed Glean on the GCP marketplace last spring, I wasn't here at the time, but that's like always one of the first steps in these marketplace partnerships is like, you got to get listed. You go from there. Even though it's been listed for 1 year, the growth quarter over quarter it's great. I mean, we just started last year and we didn't really have a lot of go-to-market behind it. And I certainly hadn't joined, so we didn't have anyone full-time looking after it. But once you kind of get that storefront up and you really can enable the reps from there, and we're doing a lot of joint go-to-market with Google, it really starts to snowball. And we get now lots of requests from Google reps who are saying, hey, we're talking to this client, or rather customer, and they're talking about their AI roadmap, and we think Glean would be a perfect fit in there. Like, that's what you want in these partnerships. And I didn't answer your question about metrics, I realized. So to touch on that, that's what you want. You want net new logos. That is the North Star of our partnerships team, is how do we get our product, how do we improve the product, of course, through our product partnerships, but primarily how do we get it to market faster and more broadly. That is what we're always measuring, is this, we call it like partner-led revenue and partner-influenced revenue. Now, I will always maintain that the partner-influenced revenue is critical. You cannot have one without the other. So yes, we should emphasize partner-led, but partner-influenced has a very important place in this equation. I will always reiterate that, especially to Arvind. We need to measure the whole process. But that's what we're driving towards, is we want these sales reps, we want these partners of ours to be talking to their customers and saying, hey, y'all should go check out Glean. And now when the Google reps are saying, hey, I want to introduce you to my customer, they're working on their GCP commit and deciding how much they want to spend over the next few years. It's a perfect opportunity for you to come in and talk about Glean, and we can factor that in. Like, it's just so symbiotic in that way that, again, it starts to snowball and build from there. And that's what we're all about.
For sure. And one last question on Glean and the ecosystem before we go into some advice. One major category we also talked about were the system integrators, the likes of Capgemini. And historically, they've been very influential in bringing a lot of these innovative technologies like robotic process automation and data infrastructure and synthetic data to market, and also kind of helping enterprises customize them to their own needs. So is that kind of similar to what the strategic fit with Glean looks like? And is there anything else we should know about kind of the role SIs might have?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic. I mean, it all is, because everything about it is new in some aspects, just because AI is also new. But it's a really interesting dynamic. And you typically have this regardless of the product, regardless of whether there's AI involved or not, is the SIs and GSIs, they want to have innovative products to bring to their clients, but they also want to be able to charge for building certain solutions. And it's a kind of a build versus buy argument. And this is something we see all the time in sales, and we're fairly prepared for. In that sense, it's similar to the pitch that I give to Accenture, Capgemini, EY. It's, look, like, y'all could go and try to build this. Like, we've been spending 5 years on it. So feel free to like go get started and try it. It's a lot harder and complex under the hood, as more so than you would think. Or you can take this product to your client immediately and they can start getting value immediately. And here's how you can start to implement Glean throughout the organization. That's when we get to lay out, like, hey, here are the different technical services opportunities. First and foremost, can you leverage our RAG-based platform to build custom AI applications? That's where it's all headed. It's all agentic. Like, that's what all these SIs and GSIs are starting to ask about. So that's kind of first and foremost. But there's also a lot of other services like building custom connectors. We have, think about 200 native connectors at this point, but there's always going to be a long tail of kind of random SaaS apps that some legacy companies use here and there. And so we don't want to build those, but guess who does? We'll go send it to, one of those guys. It's been an interesting journey. And I've actually really loved this dynamic with the GSIs, because they essentially want us to come in and speak to their clients pretty frequently. I feel like almost weekly, I'm going and doing some pitch it's a sales pitch, it's to a customer, but in the context of the partnership. And it's so fascinating to be in the room with these companies, brands that we all know, and their CEO and CIO are sitting there talking about, okay, well, which part of the business should we try to invest in first with this type of technology? Okay, how are we going to start structuring our operations so that then we can actually implement AI? Like, it impacts so much of the rest of the company. That's yet another thing you could say to these GSIs, change management, not only just in terms of how people use the product, but literally how the organization is structured and how they leverage it. I think there's going to be a lot of that in the next couple of years. And it's kind of painting that picture for the GSIs, and they really get it. So it's been fun to lean into those partnerships.
And switching a bit to advice. So I think to start, would love to hear about when you're hiring for your team at Glean on the partnership side, what skills or experiences do you like to see in candidates? And I think a quick follow-up to that, which maybe we can group together, is for those interested in roles in the AI space, most likely business facing or maybe technical as well, what can they do to ramp up their knowledge of the AI ecosystem and tech broadly?
Yeah. So, in terms of the traits that I'm looking for when building out the team, and in general, what Glean would probably look for is first is people who are going to be willing to roll up their sleeves and be scrappy and resourceful. That typically involves being a bit of a player coach, especially if you're in a formal management role. Like that is part of the job. So, when I'm getting ready for my Capgemini pitch to such and such telecom on Friday, I'm not going to be able to email someone in marketing and say, hi, like I need a deck and it needs to have this logo. Like, no, I'm doing that. I'm the one that's literally like going online and copy pasting, or someone on my team, I mean, but that is the type of behavior that we need in order to move quickly. And so we always really test for that and their kind of willingness and ability to kind of get stuff done. I would say I personally also look for folks who are very data driven and are very strong structured thinkers. Honestly, not only for putting them in charge of writing a proposal, and so I want it to actually look good and be high quality, but genuinely just working with that person. Is this someone that I can engage with and we kind of are on the same wavelength and are able to be thought partners for each other in these different areas of partnerships and the business? For me, that translates typically to someone who's strong structured thinking and very data driven. I want to know like which metrics you're driving and why, and which ones you've moved the needle on in the past. So that's all really important to me. And then I would say, of course, with partnerships, it's all about who you know. And it's really, really helpful when there are folks who come in with, hey, I've been working in the GCP marketplace ecosystem for 5 years, so I know everyone there. That is also extremely helpful to make sure that we just move really quickly. But I always kind of over-index on those first couple points.
Awesome. Well, this has been really helpful. Thank you so much for all your insights. We have a tradition here on Tech Talks where we end with a couple of fun rapid fire questions. So we always say, just respond with the first thing that I list. And then you're in the Bay Area. Could you describe for us your ideal Bay Area day?
Yeah, well, when we do have really nice weather out here, which is typical, I love going down to the South Bay and horseback riding. That's my hobby of choice and always makes my day really fun. And then usually going over to Half Moon Bay, staying on the beach, doing some hikes along the water there. You kind of get to hit all the different beautiful areas of the bay.
And then aside from Wharton Tech Talks, which I'm sure is on your roster of podcasts to listen to, do you have any others that you follow and would recommend?
Yes. So in terms of AI, the AI Daily Brief I have found to be a really good one. So I would just stay on top of that one for just news of what's rolling out. It's always changing. And then second would be the Grit podcast. It's by our friend Jubin over at Kleiner Perkins. And so I always love his interviews. He does a great job. So I would definitely recommend checking those out.
Great. Well, thank you again for joining us. I'm sure all our listeners will appreciate all the insights and advice you shared and hope you have a great week ahead.
Thank you so much for having me.